Welcome to the Voter Interest Project's candidate interviews for 2023. I'm Alan McPheeters, the Executive Director of the Voter Interest Project. Our mission is to provide voters with information they need to make informed decisions about government, candidates, and ballot measures. Our focus is local. We cover Island County, its cities and towns, and various special districts, as well as the representatives from the 10th Legislative District. The 2023 elections are local and nonpartisan. We are covering 44 elective offices on this year's ballot, including mayors, city councilors, school board directors, and commissioners for hospital, port, fire, parks, and cemetery districts. 67 candidates filed for these offices during filing week in May, and we've invited all of them to do interviews for you. We also have extensive coverage of these elections and the actions of these government agencies on our website, voterinterests.com. The following interview is with John Chaszar, one of 3 candidates for position 2 on the Oak Harbor City Council. We provided a list of potential questions to the candidate in advance of the interview. All right, well, good evening. Today is Wednesday, July the 5th, and we're here with John Chaszar, who's running for Oak Harbor City Council, position number 2. John, welcome to the Voter Interest Project.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Where are you today?
I am sitting in my living room here in wonderful Oak Harbor.
Fantastic. Let's start with just a little biographical information about you so people get to know a little bit about who you are. Are you married or single?
I am married to my wonderful wife, Heather.
Very good. And do you and Heather have children?
Yes, we do. We have 2 absolutely amazing boys. Both are grown out of the house, and they're both construction engineers. One's in Kansas City and one's in Houston.
Wow. So Christmas is kind of a fly early in kind of a deal, huh?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, mom's starting to get used to the idea that she's only gonna get 1 holiday a year because both have very serious partners now. So
yes. I remember when I went through that phase. Very good. Now, I think I can tell a little bit, and certainly I've read your bio, but for the sake of people watching this, were you raised on Whidbey, or how did you come to move here?
I'll tell you, no, I wasn't raised on Whidbey. My wife and I have been visiting here for over 30 years. My best friend, my lifelong best friend, he'll probably kill me for saying this, but we've known each other for 58 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 58, almost 59 years. And I came up here for his wedding. He's in the military. He was a pilot. I came up and I fell in love with the area. And so the side joke, and it's not really a side joke. I actually said this to my then to be wife. I brought up her to visit. I said, "You realize this is a prenup. We're retiring here. This is," and she looked at me like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." Okay. And sure enough, here we are, living in this absolutely wonderful community. We have visited here for almost annually since then. This is a very special place to us.
Very good. So now, did you serve in the military?
No, I did not serve at all in the military. I have several friends that have served this great nation, but no, I did not serve. I sort of regret that.
I didn't either, but it always seems to be something people ask around here in a Navy town, of course.
I wish I knew what I knew today. I would have served.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I know some people just say that, but I literally, as a kid, I was a little scared of the idea, and but I wish I would have.
I had a similar experience. My father really would have liked to have seen me join the service, and was disappointed when I didn't.
Yeah.
So, now, tell us a little about your professional background, what you do in your day job. I know you're working in the school system here, but before that, and how that kind of brought you to what you're doing.
Sure. I was in the hospitality industry. I was running hotels and casinos for the last 35 years. I've been in executive leadership roles for the last almost 15 years in executive leadership roles in the casino industry throughout the country, none here in Washington. And then in 2021, I decided to semi-retire. I decided just to take some time off, and the president of the company, he announced it before everybody that John's retiring. And I said, "Is that what you say when old people just retire without a job?" I mean, I'm not retiring. He goes, "It sounds better." I said, "Well, maybe to you it does." But no. So I semi-retired in 2021, And I came here, and my wife's a teacher in the school district, and there was a need for substitute teachers and para educators. And so I put my name in a hat. And for the last 2 years, I've been a substitute teacher in the school district and love every moment of it.
Now, is there what subjects do you? Is there something you normally teach, or are you all over the board?
I'm all over the board. So when you substitute teacher, you're K through 12, and so one day you can be teaching freshmen in high school, and the very next day you'll be teaching kindergarten. It's a little like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with personalities, because obviously there's two different personalities in those classrooms. So,
Absolutely.
but I
Very
gotta
different
tell you,
ideas.
it tears at my heartstrings. And I've met with some of the leaders in the casino industry recently, just to talk about old times. And I said, I wish I would have had my leadership group just go in and volunteer in these classrooms. It would have taught them patience, and would have actually taught them what's important in this world.
Hmm,
And so I've learned a tremendous amount about life in the last 2 years.
I'll bet.
So no, it's a very rewarding and humbling experience being in the classroom.
Interesting.
And more power to those folks that work, especially in elementary schools.
Yes, you have to have a lot of patience for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Very good. Um, is this the first time that you are running for office?
Yes, running for an elected office, yes. But I do currently serve on the Oak Harbor Planning Commission as vice chair,
Okay.
and I'm also an executive board member for Citizens for Better Schools. And then throughout my career, whatever city I was in, I became involved in executive leadership of either the Chamber of Commerce's or Convention and Visitors Bureaus, all the way to being on the board of directors for United Way of Southern Mississippi. So,
Wow.
so I've
I
been
should
involved.
probably interject here that
Sure.
Citizens for Better Schools was the group that was backing the school bond. It has been backing school bonds here in Oak Harbor for, I think, almost a dozen years now.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes.
Any other boards or commissions that you serve on here in Oak Harbor or
Not
on?
here, no, not here in Oak Harbor, no,
Okay.
just
Well,
those two.
planning commission. I used to be a planning commissioner myself, and I know that can be there's a fair amount of time spent on that.
I have learned a lot about the inner workings of our city just for the year and a half I've been on the planning commission.
I'll
So
bet. I had a
yeah,
similar experience. Very
yeah,
good. Okay, so let's pivot to talk about your experience and how that brings you into being a city councilman.
sure.
I guess maybe the first place to start is, why do you want to be on the city council? What made you run?
Huh. Um, be honest with you, I just want to contribute to this community. I've loved this community for so long. I believe that I've taken so much from it, just personally, and just from the rewarding part about being in this community and visiting here, that I just want to give back to the community. And I've been in executive leadership in the commercial industry, hospitality industry for a long time, and I truly believe that a city council should be made up of. It can't be made up of all people who are just focused on the social minded issues at hand. You
Right?
need some business leaders also. And you need a mixture of both on a city council, because the social issues are extremely important, but also the fiscal responsibility to our citizens and the proper use of their tax dollars is equally as important. And so I saw a need that there's with Dan Evans this past vacating a spot, that we need a business leader another business leader on the council to help balance and also provide a strong hand in the fiscal management of this wonderful city.
Very good. So fiscal management is a great pivot.
Mhm.
I was astonished to learn in researching the questions for these interviews that the biennial budget for Oak Harbor for 2023 to 24 is $250 million, which is an enormous amount of money. Can you tell us a little bit about any experience you might have working with budgets of that size?
Sure. Never to that point, but pretty close. In the casino business, everybody believes that they just make money and just churn out money and create money. That's not totally true, but they do have very large budgets. And so the average budget that I was involved with, and as general manager of a casino, you're involved in the development, the implementation, and the achievement of these budgets. And they've been in the excess of $150 million at these properties. And so my last property I was at made over $62 million a year. and net profit. I mean, it's just the numbers. Yes, they are huge numbers. $250 million. Obviously is something I'm pretty used to, and the numbers associated with that. And these properties I ran were upwards of 1,000 team members on at each property. So I'm not sure the exact number of folks that work for the city of Oak Harbor, but I'm pretty sure it's close to 1,000 people, if I had to guess.
Uh,
And
mm,
so,
Actually, interesting that you say that. We did, because we're interviewing mayoral candidates as well. The direct employees of the city number about 180. So actually
180.
much smaller
Wow.
than
Okay.
the organizations you've been involved with.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
They do a phenomenal job there with 180 individuals to run this community. They do a phenomenal job.
Uh, One of the things about being on a city council, as opposed to being general manager of a hotel, resort, casino, is that you are one of 7 people,
Mhm.
sometimes with very strong personalities and differences of opinion. Can you tell us about experiences you've had where you've been in committees or other sort of governing bodies and have had to persuade people to see your point of view and how that
Sure.
worked out?
Sure. I'm not sure about, I I don't like the idea of seeing my point of view.
Mhm.
Understanding my point of view, probably a better analogy. When you're in these casinos, obviously they're huge budgets and they're huge payrolls. Your director team is roughly 12 people, and you have these are pretty big investments for the owner. So the team in is a very strong team, which comes with very strong personalities. So, your job is to sit back and listen. And I would do the exact same here, and provide your own feedback and provide your own opinions. But the biggest thing is everybody has to understand, and I wish more people in Washington, D.C. would understand this, that you're not always going to get your way. And, but you have to understand when you walk out of those chambers, whatever decision is made, you have to support that decision because you have to give the community the confidence in the people they've elected.
Yes.
And so if we're coming out of chambers and pointing fingers at the wrong decision in your own personal opinion, um, you're not always right. And so there's got to be compromise, absolutely 100% compromise. I obviously have an opinion. I have lots of opinions, if you ask my wife, but I have an opinion or ideas about what I would like Oak Harbor to look like. But I'm just one person out of 10,400, depending on what census you listen to,
Mhm.
about the people in Oak Harbor. There's 10,400 ideas out here of what we should be. And that's not including the people who aren't citizens or business owners here in Oak Harbor, who are equally just as important to the success of our community. And so we have to listen, but we have to compromise. And we have to understand we're not going to always get our way. It's just not going to happen. It's not. I mean, it's just not. Period. And once we get to that understanding and we can compromise, I believe I've had that happen before. I wish I could tell you it was always successful. I tried to negotiate a settlement between 2 associations. One actually, I was a member of both associations that were in a legal feud, and you had people on both sides that wanted 100% their own way. So we never came to an agreement, and it went to court and it was settled by a judge. I mean, it was just, and it shouldn't come to that. And just you have to compromise. And I get it. Some people believe they're 100% right, and I can respect that to a certain degree. But when it comes to our community, we have to provide consistency and we have to provide confidence in everything we do. So,
Very good. What do you see as the biggest challenge that Oak Harbor faces?
just seems like every time we open the paper, there's a new one. Um,
No.
um, the challenge, the biggest challenge, and I just got done working in Evansville, Indiana. So I saw how difficult this is. And this relates back to the just recent article in the newspaper about the infrastructure here in Oak Harbor.
Yeah.
And Evansville was going through a multi-billion-dollar project of replacing all the sewer system, including the plant, which let's not touch on that right now on this interview. But if our sewer system is decaying, okay, it has to be fixed. It has, because that eventually ends up in our water system. It ends up everywhere. I mean, not all of us are on city water. A lot of us are on wells, and and whatever, when these sewer systems are compromised, it compromises the health of our citizens. So, but that's not a cheap expense. And it's not only expensive, it's also a hassle. It's a huge hassle because everything's underground. And so there's major disruptions to our citizens and business community when you have to replace the sewer system. So, um, I look at that as a huge challenge. And, when I read that, and I'm confident in my ability to be elected here, and I hope I am elected and have the humble. One of my first things I want to do is I want to get a briefing on the full scope of what we're looking at here, because all I know is what I read in the paper.
Yeah.
And so I want to know what we're looking at. What is the city's plan? What do they have? What plans do they have to address the immediate needs and the long-term needs? And also, what is the plan to minimize disruption? And also, equally too, if not more important, is how are we going to pay for this?
Yeah.
And so that I see as a huge, because it's not just money. I mean, we're tearing up streets, we're closing streets, and it's not like we can replace the system overnight. It's there's weeks on end where people are having to drive across metal plates to get to their houses and things like that. So it's not a pretty sight when we have to replace our sewer system. So
Yeah, that story was staggering in its depiction of how bad things are.
wow. Well, you know what? It's a great community, and yes, it's underground, Um, I'd like to believe that there's some exaggeration to it. I hope there's some exaggeration to it, because it is such a big undertaking to replace the sewer system of any city. I don't care how small you are.
Well, and especially in light of the fact that we are still and will be for some time paying off the clean water facility. Uh,
Yes,
but
yes,
there will
absolutely.
have to be, I'm sure, a pretty heavy contribution by the state and possibly by the federal government in order to make that project happen.
I know in Evansville that the federal government participated in the replacement costs, but there will be a financial burden on the city of Oak Harbor at some measure.
Yeah.
So
Um, you might be better suited to answer this question than a lot of people because of your experience in business. Do you have benchmarks for what you want to accomplish and how you know whether you have been successful? If you're elected 4 years from now and you're deciding whether or not you're going to run again, how are you going to, what would you point to say, I was successful in my first term, you should give me another one?
wow. Now you said I have an advantage here, but I've never been in a role where things are abstract and subjective. Most of the 99.9% of the time, my role in the private sector is by objective goals, whether it's achieving budgets and things like that. And so, wow. Uh, the abstract answer to that question is I hope when I do retire from the city council that I left it a better place than when I started. How to put measurements on that? I don't know how to put measurements on that. And I've been asked this question sort of before, um, and um, it wouldn't be about myself, the measurements. One of the things I was asked is, I mean, what do you want to see? Some of the buzzwords I use is accountability.
Mhm.
And yes, I'm definitely got to hold myself accountable and my fellow council persons accountable as well. But one of the things that I asked was, are there benchmarks, are there goals for city administrators? Do they have budget goals? What happens if they don't make those benchmarks? Do they have benchmarks? Do they have during their annual review something that they're looking at as an objective? And so, when you're in city council, you don't control your own destiny. You have to you have to work with other folks. And so, this first for position 4, we're only there for 2 years because Dan Evans's unexpired term of 2 years. So hopefully we're doing this again 2 years from now, you and I. But you know, um, it's it's very difficult to put an actual quantitative or objective you know benchmark or accountability standard to a council person. um, I have a mantra that says that I want to make this place a better place to live, play, and work. I mean, and how I can measure that, to be honest with you, I wish I had an answer for you right now. It's how I measure that, other than I get 100% of the vote in the next election. That's that would be that would be okay. I think I'm doing a good job. Yeah,
Well,
that's
it only is going to this year. It'll only happen for 2 council members, Tara Hicks
yes,
and
it
Eric
will.
Marshall.
And that may not even happen also. There may be some folks that write in other individuals. So,
That's
but
true.
I mean, it's very hard to quantitate somebody like that. And I mean, the same thing with the mayor. You can always say the mayor is going to be held accountable to making budget or coming in under budget, things like that. I mean, but as a council person, you're more dealing with the subjective view versus the objectives.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's fair. It's a tough question. It might be a better question for mayors than for city council.
maybe maybe in 6 years you and I'll be talking about that then.
Fair enough. I took a look at your application for appointment to the city council, and there was a question there about what your top priorities were.
Mhm.
Well, let's kind of go through what those were. You mentioned affordable housing and the need to incentivize developers that wish to build affordable housing. Can you tell us more about how you think that should work?
Sure. Well, the first thing, if we don't start attracting developers to develop low-income housing, multi-unit housing, multifamily housing, um, we must get used to economic stagnation because we won't be able to accommodate anybody here. And we'll also have to get used to a higher cost of our way of life. I mean, I'm going to give you an example. A hospitality worker who has to live relatively close to where they work here in the city. Um, $17 an hour is not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it. And so, in order for these employers to attract quality and productive employees, they're going to have to pay more, up to including benefits. And a lot of our hospitality industry folks never provided benefits before, and it's something that's really important these days. But also the higher wage. But with all those costs associated with hiring employees, comes all those costs get passed on to the consumer. So if we don't find a way to reduce what it costs for someone to live in this town, um, it's going to have to be absorbed by the employers and by us as consumers eventually. And so, recently we were just presented at a joint workshop with the city council and the planning commission. There is a movement now to an idea, and several communities in the state of Washington have taken advantage of this, where we designate areas in the town for low income housing,
Mhm.
that those properties that they build they don't pay property taxes for X number of years. And so I believe we need to adopt this as soon as possible. Now, granted, there has to be a lot more thinking to this. There's several ways of implementing this on different levels. Um, and one of the ways that you offset this is, so you think about this, so the county and the city would not get any property taxes.
Right.
Now, granted, if they're building this on a dilapidated property or a vacant piece of land, they're not getting very much property taxes in the first place. But some communities have basically said, okay, we'll just absorb it. Okay, because we're going to have these new people moving to town. They're going to be shopping and they're going to be spending money in Home Depot and Walmart and Safeway and Hagen's and so on and so forth in our restaurants. And so that'll be the economic multiplier, which I believe in. It's trickle down. Some communities have taken what the property taxes that building would have been paying and split it amongst all the rest of the taxpayers. That I disagree with. I think, and I know why communities do that, because there is an extra burden when more people move to town. There's an extra burden on the systems, the police system, fire, EMS, so on and so forth. There's extra burden, but it's incremental and it's probably small. But I do understand that it is incremental, but I just believe that there's trickle down effect of having those folks. So I think we need to it needs to be approved as soon as possible. I think that's something that we need to look at. Because we need to give these builders incentives, because if we don't give them incentives to build low income housing, I mean, we're still, even though interest rates are going up, so's property values in this city. And so why would a builder without any incentives build low income housing if he can still build homes that he's making a fortune off of selling in the open market? So we have to give him incentives to build low income housing. So I think this is a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, let me frame the question maybe a little bit differently.
Sure.
If we're going to increase the housing stock, now these are extreme cases.
Sure.
I get that, but you can either expand the city, open up the urban growth area, and build out, or you can increase density requirements in some or all of the city and effectively build up. Do you have a preference between those?
A little bit of both. I understand. So we have what, a 4-story max here in the city of Oak Harbor, I believe. I think we can't go any higher than 4 stories. That's depending on. I get it. I assume there's some room for variances and that. But I haven't seen anybody apply for variances and those things. But I mean, I've seen great projects of mixed use with retail on the first floor and living arrangements. I mean, it seems to be a new millennial concept to live where you work or live where you play. And it's the density requirement also. The city and the planning commission have made some strides in how we calculate the density. There are also, secondary dwelling units is a priority right now, and no, we allow them right now, sort of, but to solidify that so we can control that growth. But there's a lot of land here, interior, in Oak Harbor that we can build on. There is pockets of land where we can build, and so, I mean, there's one right now that the county owns, which is in the city limits, right there at Swantown and Fort Nugent, that they're looking to deed that over to a low income developer, which is great. It's fantastic. That's something that we really really need. But you're also going to have, and I'm sure you've heard of the term NIMBYs, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
And so, how do we do that? We make sure that these are attractive and complementary to the neighborhoods they're going into. And so, it's not easy. It's not an easy proposition, but low income does not mean bad areas. Low income housing is for like an apartment complex. Someone, whatever percentage of median income you're going to use, approximately would be paying $1,200 for a 2-bedroom apartment. That's not cheap, okay, but it's cheaper than what a lot of folks are paying right now in this town.
Yeah.
And so we need a lot more of those. A $900 1-bedroom unit, it's still a lot of money, okay, but it's a lot better than what folks are paying now.
That's true. Now, we talked about before we started recording about the fact that I have a 30-minute timer. I am spectacularly bad at actually starting a thing. So I'm just looking at the clock on my computer, and I think we've been talking for about 25 or 30, probably close to 30 minutes. So I think this is probably a good place to wrap up.
Sure.
We could go on for quite a long time. We have lots of other stuff that we could talk about, but
absolutely.
Let's just move to this. What is the best place for people to find out more about you and the things that you want to see happen in the city? Is it website or Facebook page, or email you directly, or how?
Well, I just started a Facebook page, John Chaszar for Oak Harbor City Council.
Okay.
I just started putting information out there on that. I also encourage folks that my email address, and some people are going to think this is crazy, but it's chazarj@gmail.com. If you don't know how to spell my name, just drive up and down one of these streets. You'll see my signs everywhere. chazarj@gmail.com. And feel free to send me an email, the question. I mean, one of the things I'm running on is transparency. And sometimes people won't like my answer, but it's going to be the straight answer, and it's going to be the real answer. And so, and if I don't know the answer, I will find out what the answer is. And so, but it's one of the places you can find. And then once I'm elected, I'll obviously be much more available to folks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, John.
Alan, thank you very much for what you do for the community. This is a great addition and provides great information. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to end recording now. Well, thank you for watching our interview with City Council candidate John Chaszar. And again, like we did with the Barbara Arms interview, I have mislabeled which position it is John's running for. John is a candidate for position 4, which is the seat Dan Evans vacated a couple of months back, as is Barbara Arms and Wisman Davila. We invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, which is available in 4 local editions: Camano Island, North Whidbey, Central Whidbey, and South Whidbey. The newsletter arrives in your mailbox every Monday morning with news and events from your part of Island County. Subscribe to our newsletter at voterinterest.com/subscribe. And look for more of these candidate interviews as the election season continues. Thank you and good night.